Hello, I'm Malcolm.
And I'm Janice. Do you remember the Twilights?
Does that come between sunset and moonglow?
That wasn't the Twilight that I was thinking about, but...
Oh,
hey,
you mean the band?
the band, yes.
The band for when we were both babies. Yes, I do. That's next on our time.
Twilights.
Twilights. Yes, I remember. I actually do remember because Needle in a Haystack has stayed in my memory bank forever.
Is it?
And in this episode, we are delighted to welcome the original member, John Bywaters. Plural, because there's more than one of you.
That's right. Hello, Janice.
Hi, welcome.
Hello, Malcolm. Yeah. Hi.
You played bass.
Absolutely, in the Twilights.
So how did this start for you? Go back when you were a kid. Were you a musical kid?
I wasn't really. I was in the St John's Drum Corps.
Oh, okay.
Playing a tenor drum. And,
Handy for bass.
Yeah, that's like a bass drum sort of thing, isn't it? You know.
Yeah.
And we used to hang out as a bit of a gang. And we'd heard on the grapevine there was a fancy dress party at Kevin Crease's house back in the day.
Kevin was a newsreader here in South Australia.
Yes.
You come from interstate.
That's right.
Very, very respected and well known.
Yeah.
And a pioneer of television.
Absolutely.
The first face on Adelaide television.
There you go.
Yeah.
So you heard something?
We heard on the grapevine there was a fancy dress party for this big television star. He had it, you know, and we just all rocked up, and it was a beatnik theme. Remember beatniks?
Yeah.
Well, it was
I can see you've still got the beatnik.
I have,
I
yeah.
forgot to take it off.
Hey, man. And it was a beatnik theme, and of course I had nothing to do with music or anything, but somebody said, why don't we go as a beatnik band? So I found a T-chest bass somewhere and turned up at this party, and we had one guy on trumpet, another guy who was learning piano accordion.
Great combo.
Yeah, and somebody else was learning piano, but there was no piano there, of course, you know. There was about 5 or 6 of us, and we went, and we were all in fancy dresses, beatniks. We won first prize at this fancy dress thing. And we walked away with big heads, let me tell you. And somebody said, why don't we become a real band? So the very next Monday, I conned my parents in taking me to Savoury's music store in Adelaide.
Yes.
And picked up a guitar.
Good heavens.
And I had my first lesson that very first day. I got the guitar. And then we used to have rehearsals, you know, with all the rest of the guys who were in the beatnik band. And one by one, they dropped out. They said, oh, this is too hard, you know.
Playing music.
How old were you then?
Oh, 14 or 15 or something, you know.
Yeah.
But I kept up with guitar. And, of course, the beatnik band fell away. I was still in the St John's Drum Corps, as we all were. And I used to go to dances, you know, weekends and stand in front of the stage and look up at the, you know, and say, oh, I could do that, you know. And I met a drummer called Dean Burbeck, and he was standing in front of the stage going like that, saying, well, I can do that.
Yeah.
Right? And he said to me, what do you do? I said, I'm learning guitar. He said, do you want to join a band? I said, oh, all right. All I could do was play some chords. I couldn't do much else. So there was another guitarist called Ivan and Dean on drums and me playing chords, and we rehearsed just about every night for a month to play at a free show in a Catholic convent at Royal Park. And that was the start of my sort of band career.
What were they doing at a Catholic convent?
Oh, it was a dance sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
You know, somebody got this gig, you know, there's no money, but would you play for us, you know?
Oh, okay.
But, you know, that's interesting because today so many kids who are learning want to go straight into the business and they want to, you know, top draw stuff straight away. Don't realise that the pleasure of becoming a performer is starting like this.
Yeah.
Those little steps, those baby steps.
That make it more memorable.
That's right. And
I had a good story at the end.
at the end.
I had no idea where this was all going. I was just learning from my guitar book, you know, how to play chords and things, and playing along with this band. I think we were called the Plainsmen. We only ever had one job, that was at the convent, you know. And I was still hanging out with the St John's Drum Corps guys. And it's funny, just recently that one of those guys called Ralph Drage came to where I was playing at a hotel here. And he said, you used to annoy us so much. Every time we came to your place and wanted you to come to the beach with us or play footy, you'd say, no, I think I'll play my guitar.
Is that right?
And he said, look where it got you.
Isn't that brilliant?
That's right. So what happens when you're playing, you evolve, you actually get sort of taken up by other bands. They go around and headhunt and they say, oh, that guy there, he's pretty good. Let's ask him to join our band, you know.
So is that how it happened for you?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Who were the influences on you then?
Oh, always the Shadows,
Yep.
Cliff Richard,
Yep.
and some of those sorts of guys, you know. Elvis, of course.
Yeah.
Elvis was starting to come pretty big in those days. You'd see Elvis in the movies, and all the kids would rush the screen going, Elvis, Elvis, Elvis. And they'd rush in the front of the theatre, you know. So you'd do some Elvis songs, if you had a singer that could cut it, of course, you know.
Yep.
So you had to sing like Elvis or Cliff Richard, and the band had to play like the Shadows, you know. And that's what we did, you know.
It's funny, through Facebook I've connected with a guy called Ken Taylor, who was a guitarist, and I was working at the Wonderland Ballroom in those years singing, and he was the guitarist. He's been working in the UK, married in the UK, worked at the Butlins holiday camps and all that sort of stuff. It's interesting to see how his career as a guitarist, but he just recently put up on Facebook a whole lot of pictures of the different things that he'd won and that he'd done prior to the age of 16 or 17 when we all started working together at the Wonderland. So it's interesting how it just takes your life off in any direction, and it obviously did for you. So how did the Twilights come about?
Well, I ended up getting headhunted into a band called the Hurricanes.
Right.
And that was a very good instrumental band. And we used to have a lot of singers that used to say, can you back us, you know? Maria Van Zyl, John Perry, John Bradshaw. They were singers that could sing but had no band.
Yep.
And the Hurricanes used to back all these sort of singers. And the Twilights originally started as a three-piece vocal group.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes,
Paddy
I forgot
McCartney,
that.
Glenn Shorrock and Mike Sykes.
Yes.
And when the Beatles had sort of hit big, there was a Beatles sound-alike competition at the Palais Royal. And the Hurricanes went in, and we did a Beatles song called Little Child or something. We wanted to do Please Mr. Postman, but the Twilights 3, they earmarked that song for themselves. Well, of course, the Twilights won it because they were a vocal group and they sounded fantastic, you know. And they were backed by a band called the Vector Men from Elizabeth.
Right.
The Vector Men, yeah. And
That
had
was
some
a breeding ground, though. That's the
Absolutely.
thing.
Well,
Because that's where Jimmy Barnes
That's
came
exactly
from, and John Swan, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. Wow.
And the Twilights had a falling out with the Vector Men over, I don't know, whatever. Some say it was money, some say it was creative difference. Anyway, the Twilights 3, both, all of the above, the Twilights approached us because they'd seen us at the Palais Royal. They said, would you like to become our backing band? And we said, yeah, very serendipitously, you know. And we backed them, and we started to work for Service to Youth Council, playing at the Oxford Club,
Yes.
which was a big
That
deal
was
in
a
those
big deal,
days.
Yep.
And we got on so well, somebody said, why don't we amalgamate and just become the Twilights? And that's what we did.
Wow. And when was that? How long ago?
Oh,
What year was that?
65,
Oh, okay.
I guess.
Well, where did the name come from?
Yeah.
Because they had it before. Did they ever say?
They did. I think it was from the Twilight Zone.
Didn't come before it's sunset and moon.
Might have done. Yeah, they might have sat out and watched the sun come up, you
There you
know.
go. Oh,
There he
the
is.
Twilight.
Yeah. No, it was from the Twilight Zone,
There's
I
actually a
believe.
song around, I think, In the Twilight, was called In the Twilight. It was a beat boppy thing, I think, in the early 50s.
How's it going, Malcolm?
Yeah. And you remember?
I could sing it up there if you like.
Oh, it's a Tiny Tim song.
Boom, boom. Very good.
Yes. And we
It's in the twilight. It's in the something in the twilight. Tell 'em I'll be there.
See, not you done
okay.
now.
No, that's the cool of the
Oh,
evening.
that's the.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not the
Wrong.
twilight.
No.
I'll think of it. It'll come to me.
We'll get back to us, right?
Yes, we'll get back to it.
And we worked at the Oxford Club and some other associated sort of dances. We had a residency at the Salisbury Youth Centre in
Yeah.
Salisbury, Round Terrace.
Yep.
You being from Salisbury, you'd know where that was?
Oh, probably no, because
No?
I was very young when we were
You
in
must have
Salisbury.
sung there, surely.
No, I didn't.
Didn't you?
Not in those days.
You were
I was
too young.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
too young.
that's
She was
right.
too young. She's only 34.
I wish.
I was that once.
Round the waist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to have a girlfriend, 36, 24, 36, and her other leg was the same.
Oh, boom,
Yeah.
boom. I thought you were going to do the phone number.
Yeah, so we worked around. We had a Friday night regular. We played the Malibu Club. That was a regular thing for a while. As a matter of fact, when the Beatles were in town in, June 64, was it?
Yeah, 1964.
The Friday night we were working at the Malibu Club, which was at the Semaphore Lifesaving Club.
And you were hoping they would turn up and discover you, right?
There, they didn't.
Or just hold it there for a tick. We've got to take a quick commercial break, but we'll be back in a moment. And we're back. Who are we back with, Janice?
John Bywaters. I was going to say Baywater.
In your twilight.
I know. Sorry, John.
That's okay.
Welcome back.
So we got up to the twilights having a regular gig.
Regular gigs, plural.
Gigs.
Yeah, we worked all over Adelaide, and it was just going pretty good for us. And then we got an offer to go to Melbourne and play over there one weekend at a club called Pinocchio's, which we did. They liked us and invited us back, and we came over by Ansett Pioneer bus.
With all
Believe
your
that,
gear
for the weekend.
under the bus.
Yeah.
So who was in the group then?
Well, it was a six-piece.
Yep.
Frank Bernard on drums, Peter Brightoak, myself, Paddy
On bass.
McCartney,
Yeah,
Terry
singing.
Britton on guitar, and Glenn Shorrock
And singing.
singing. Yeah, and we went over for the weekend to play at Pinocchio's, and we were very well received. Got invited back a couple of months later. Got on the bus again and took our gear in the Pioneer bus, you know.
And by this time, you were actually becoming really well known.
Yes, that's right.
Did you have a record first, or did that just develop with time?
We were offered a recording deal pretty much straight away after the amalgamation of the Hurricanes and the Twilights. When the Beatles hit, all the EMI managers around the world were told by EMI, go out and find bands that sound like the
Find
Beatles.
another
Oh,
Beatles.
really?
Yeah.
Absolutely, that's what
Yeah.
they were told.
Yeah.
And in Adelaide, I think Alan Munn, who was the state manager of EMI, he told me recently, he said they signed up 4 bands in Adelaide. I don't know who the other 3 were.
But you were one of them.
I think we were the only ones that went on to have a decent recording career, because we had 13 singles and 2 albums in our time.
What was your first?
It was an original song called If She Finds Out,
Yeah, I remember that.
and on the back was another original
I
called
do remember
Think
that.
of that one.
I Don't Know Where the Wind Will Blow Me.
That I don't remember.
Well, it was a B-side.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you got quite a bit of airplay. That was the good thing.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. And of course, once you've got airplay, that helps you become more well known.
Yeah.
But also those Saturday morning old black and white TV shows. We were just discussing before, one that I used to do here at, I didn't host, I hosted a kids show, and straight after that in came the bands, and we mentioned Noel O'Connor,
Yeah.
who was quite iconic
For Adelaide
for
in those
Adelaide
days.
in those days.
Yeah.
And then in Melbourne, it was Rusty, Wiley and Johnny Young, wasn't it, that had the main shows?
Yeah, Rusty Wilder replaced somebody. Was it? Hang on. The Go Show.
The Go Show, there was the Go Show.
There was Commotion, Go
Yeah.
Show.
Commotion was a mime show.
Uptight.
Uptight.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
In Time.
Yeah, there were a lot of.
Or was In Time the local?
In Time was
really
here.
hard to remember, but it's
Yeah.
funny when we think about those times. The TV stations didn't have budgets, and they certainly didn't have the audio departments to the extent that they needed to. So you had to have a record to get on telly, because
Yeah.
otherwise you'd never hear your song, because
That's
you
it.
had to mime them all, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. Stairway to the Stars on Channel 7, that was a show that
yeah.
most of us went on.
Right.
That was, I think, the only music show at that time, wasn't it?
9 had one, but I think it was a bit later. 10 had one, but 7, I think, were the first with that type of show.
Yeah, and of course you had Adelaide Tonight.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
They had
came
live bands on there.
later,
Yeah.
And a house orchestra.
Well, yeah, of course. Whoever had, and you would have played live for that probably, but
Yeah.
it was whoever had the hit records, because that's what people want to see.
That's right.
Clips didn't exist in those days, so we never knew what a band looked like unless we saw them on telly miming their hit record.
So, John, what happened to the Twilights? What became of the
Got
Twilights?
lost in the moon glow.
That's right. We went to Melbourne permanently. Gary Spry, who owned Pinocchio's, the club in Toorak in Melbourne, said to us after we'd done like 3 weekend trips over there, he said, why don't you come and live in Melbourne permanently and I could get you a heap of work. And I was married at this time with a little baby.
How old were you?
Oh,
16?
19 or something, yeah.
Gosh,
That's right.
early days.
Very, yeah.
But people married younger then. The truth is, people did marry younger.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I'm glad we did. I'm still married to the same lady. We've been married for 53
Wow.
You just don't live
Congratulations.
together anymore.
years. Well, we do
That's
actually.
not true. That's
There you go.
All my contemporaries are on their 2nd, 3rd, 4th marriage.
Yeah. Well
Yeah.
done, John.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just too stubborn to bust up, you know. Oh, it's too hard, you know. You just divide everything up and then you start again.
No, if you're lucky though, and you find the right person from the beginning,
So was she happy to go to Melbourne with you?
Well, she went. She didn't query it. She was not happy over there because young baby,
Yeah. No family?
no family support like babysitting
No.
duties and all that. We didn't know anybody. Oh, she hated it, you know. And the other thing was that we were constantly touring. She was home on her own so much.
Yes.
Yeah, we toured from Melbourne all around Australia.
yeah.
Oh, it was terrible, you know, like the amount of work we did.
But it was it was big. You were really the biggest group there for quite a few years.
And therein lies the problem. You know, there's a sting in the tail.
Yeah.
You're very popular.
There always
Everybody
is.
wants to see you.
Yeah.
There always is.
Yeah. So anyway, we worked around Australia, as I said, and recorded lots of hit singles. And
Needle in a Haystack was my favourite, I think. What were some of the others? Just refresh our memory.
Kathy Come Home.
Oh, yes, of
950, Young Girl,
Yeah.
Time Emotion, Study Man, John Hardy. 13 singles, as I
Who
said.
wrote all those? Was it a joint effort or was there a main songwriter?
The main songwriter, after he started to meditate, get this, true story, Terry Britton.
Oh, really?
Terry Britton. When the Maharishi was big,
I remember him dressed in all that gear. I remember.
that's right.
Yes.
I mean, we followed the Beatles and George
Yeah, yeah.
Harrison. And then there was a Lopsang Rampa, an Indian guru who came, and we went to Monash University to see him, and we all made a donation, and he whispered our mantra in our ear. Here's your mantra. Don't tell anybody, right? And we all tried it. And I gave up it was a bad joke. And to this day, Glenn Shorrock still meditates a bit. Terry meditates a lot. But the moment he started to meditate, all these songs came out of him.
Is that right?
Absolutely.
Interesting.
It was like a torrent of songs.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And he'd come to practice and he'd play this and say, what do you think of that? And we'd learn it and we'd go and record it. It was fantastic.
Fantastic. That is amazing.
Yeah. And anyway, moving right along, there came the Hoadley's Battle of the Bands.
Yes, remember those well.
And the inaugural one in 1966, we won it. And the prize was a trip to England on a cruise liner,
Yep.
the Castel Felice, a Sitmar line, a recording date at Abbey Road. We recorded 3 singles there. And a gig or something, 2 gigs or whatever. And we get to England, we land in Southampton, we get the train up to London with a rep from EMI. Our manager was supposed to be there, but he was arriving a day later. He wanted us to pick him up from the airport. Go figure. Anyway, go figure.
But what I love is the public transport logic. You know, the big band coming into town on the train.
That's right.
On the bus.
Well, the man from EMI met us at Southampton,
Yeah.
you know, at the dock. you know, bless his heart.
Where were those limos?
Yeah, that's right.
those days.
Today you'd get a limo,
Yeah.
wouldn't you? You get picked up in a minibus or
Yeah.
or a limo, whatever. So we get to EMI, they take us around and they show us a stack of singles from Australia and say, have a listen to some of these, you know. Because we'd been on a boat for 6 weeks, we didn't know what was going on.
No, of course.
We didn't know what was number one.
No.
And the first thing we did when we saw this fella from EMI, we said, what's number one? He said, oh, Good Vibrations, Beach Boys. We said, Beach Boys?
Who
What
were
about
they?
the Beatles?
Really?
Yeah, that's
oh,
right.
Gosh.
And we had no accommodation. We rang the grade organisation who was supposed to be giving us the gig, and we said, we're the Twilights from Australia. And they said, who?
Oh.
We just won the Hoadley's Battle of the Bands, right? And we ring up for our gig. They said, what gig? They knew nothing about it.
No.
And a guy called Nat Berlin, who was a cousin of Irving Berlin, the composer, who was a director of the grade organisation, took pity on us, and they got us some gigs. But it was badly organised.
Good
Isn't that
heavens.
amazing? So, just cut to the end of the story, I suppose. The band obviously disbanded at some point.
Oh, yes.
And what have you been doing since then?
Well, I've been playing a lot. I've never really given up playing.
Yep. Well, you're in the Hall of Fame here locally, aren't you?
Yeah, I was the first one to be presented with a Hall of Fame medal. Peter Tilbrook from the Masters was number 2 on the docket.
That's a pretty high accolade in the country and the town that you live in, isn't it?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I got a phone call, I think, from David Day, and he said, we want to induct you in the Hall of Fame. I said, why me? Because I didn't think I deserved it.
Oh.
You know, there
It's
were plenty of
hard
other people.
I think when you're on the inside, it's hard to really appreciate what you've done, you know,
But
because you
with
just do it.
Your contribution to the music industry,
Huge.
really, for all those years.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't give it any thought. I was
No.
just doing what I do. Ray O'Connor from the Penny Rockets called me a journeyman.
Journeyman.
A journeyman,
Yeah, I know what that means.
which applies to plumbers and carpenters.
Yeah.
You know, like a master builder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's an interesting turn of phrase.
Yeah.
I'm a
It is, isn't
journeyman,
it?
you know.
Yeah.
Gosh almighty.
Yeah.
It keeps the whole thing going. John, we'll be back to talk and say goodbye in a minute. In the meantime, stay with us. A lot more to talk about with one of the original Twilights. I could burst into dum dooby doo down down. Breaking up is hard to do. How did you? Why did you break up? Why did the Twilights break up?
Well, we spent 6 months away. We came back from England. It was 6 weeks to get over there by boat, 6 weeks to get back. And that was almost an anticlimax coming back. We're thinking, oh, we're coming back the same old thing. We didn't do anything in England to speak of. We'd had a couple of gigs, not enough to sustain ourselves.
But in those days, you could say I've worked in the UK, then come back to Australia and everyone thought you were famous.
Yeah, well, we just came back to more of the same, more work, you know,
Yeah.
working 6 or 7 nights. Let me tell you, there was one day in Melbourne where we did 6 spots in one day.
Gosh.
Going from club to club.
Yeah, because you only did 20-minute spots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it started with a lunchtime concert at the Craft Factory in Port Melbourne.
Good gracious.
And then at 8 o'clock, I think there was a dance at Brighton. Then around to Camberwell, and then somewhere else, and they ended up at the Thumping Tum at 4 o'clock in the morning playing.
Grief.
So you just
Those were the
decided...
days.
Well, you get burnout, you know.
Yep.
And we were due to go back to England, and then our drummer said, I don't want to go. I don't want to play this pop music anymore. And we did audition 6 different drummers, and none of them wanted to join us.
Oh.
And we were due to go back to England, and somebody just said, oh, let's break up. And us not appreciating what we really had, said, yeah, why don't we?
Oh, no.
What an amazing
What a silly
story.
decision, you know.
Yeah.
What an
End of
amazing
an era.
story. John,
End of a
there's
time.
so much more to talk about. We'll have to get you back another time and talk
Pleasure,
some more.
please do.
I
really
hope this has
interesting.
been, you know, for people watching the program, I hope this has been interesting for you guys to hear about one of what was the biggest bands in Australia.
That's right.
At that time of the Beatles. So until next time we see you with some more interesting people.
Yes, you should take care of yourself.
And you too.
You too.
Keep yourself nice to them. Bye.
There's so many things things will take a turn today. Besame, I can only start to say, and remember when I said foolish, fickle things that came into my head.